Okay, so we've got Maya open. I've got a cube. I'm going to go with the Hypershade right now. So bigger things to do. Even if you're having a little bit of technical difficulty, try to grasp the concepts. We're going over kind of core foundational stuff right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Hypershade. I've got it on my shelf, but for recording purposes, I'll go Window, Rendering Editors, and I'm going to go to Hypershade. So the Hypershade is up. What we see right now are considered the 3 default shaders that would come with Maya. So these are our defaults. When you're working on a project, you don't touch any of these. These are basically stay as they are. Right? We don't mess with the original ones. So watch what happens. The way I would sort of think about what we're looking at right now is buckets of paint. Okay, so we have right now, this is the main bucket of paint. When I generate something, it's going to come out with this color gray at render time. So the problem is there's only one bucket of paint. So if I go like this, right-click Object, I make a new cube, I go Control-D, We've got a few objects in the scene. I'm going to go R. And let's try messing with this color for a second. So this is the default shader. I click on it. So I have to select it here. So make sure it's selected. Here we can see that you've got this color tab open. And we've also got over here the color tab selected in the attribute editor. You can work kind of back and forth either through this window or you can work through the attribute editor. Originally, this was not here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color. So what we're going to do is I'm going to mouse over this little swatch of gray, and I'm going to left click, and I get the color picker right here. Can I move it? Not really. All right, but what I can do is I can change the color. So let's change the color here, and I could just give it something like this. So I choose a different color, right? When I look back at the main scene, look at what's happened. Everything in the scene is changed to this color because, again, you got one bucket of paint. We have one bucket of paint to work with for this scene, and if we change, this is the master Lambert, essentially. Changing this one is going to affect everything that we make. So if I make anything new, I go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and let's make a torus. It will also come up with this color. So good practice. We never mess with this color. We always leave it at this default sort of gray. Does anybody know why it's the color gray? Anybody? It's the color of plasticine, which is the modeling clay that traditional sculptors used to use. People still use it. It's an oil-based clay, and when they originally made Maya, they were a bunch of sculptors, and they basically were paying tribute to those who came before them. If you use ZBrush or Mudbox, they come through as red, kind of like a brick color red, and that's another type of plasticine, so another type of oil-based clay. So trivia contest questions. Okay, so let's delete this. So what I'll do is I'm going to bring this back just because it's not supposed to be this color. Let's just reset it. It looks good. It's a little dark. Here, that was still kind of dark. There, that's pretty close. And it's also supposed to be easier on the user's eyes. If you have like a white screen and you're staring at it all day long, it's a little bit harder on your eyes if you're spending lots of hours on the program. So we don't really mess with this one. So then what do? We come down here. We want to go into this Create tab right here. So you should have this Create window. Does everybody have the Create window? Does anybody not have the Create window? Be proud. It's okay. All right, so in this Create window, this allows us to basically create different types of shaders. What's a shader? It's allowing us to sort of mimic some real-world objects' physical properties. So think of like this table right now. It has like a semi-gloss across it, and it's got this kind of like speckled effect. Metal would have sort of a different reflective quality. As the light is hitting it, it's going to kind of refract in a different way than it would. If you think of a milk carton, if I empty a milk carton, you have this sort of translucent surface. Those are the type of things that we would sort of try to mimic with these different shaders. And the coolest thing is people basically, the ones who made them, basically name these shaders after themselves. So there's a person named Lambert. There's a person named Fong. Fong made two, so he's got Fong and Fong Yi. And there's multiple ones. So if you're really smart and you go over to CS and you start writing your own shaders and you come up with this amazing, like super, low cost, efficient shader to render something out spectacular, name it after yourself. Be proud. Yeah. So you'll live forever. Blinn was another person. Blinn was also somebody. All right. So we're not gonna. That's a different class. So there's also Perlin Noise. Yeah, you got the Perlin Noise. So what we want to do is we want to generate a new shader here. So this is go into shaders in another class, but I want to make another Lambert. Okay, so the default is a Lambert, and we want to make another one. Why are we using Lamberts? Reason we're using Lamberts is because they're probably some of the more efficient, one of the most efficient shaders to work with. It has basically shading, so it's not a flat surface. If it didn't have any shading on it, as I would move around the box, it would have a consistent color all the way around right now that wouldn't change without any type of shading on it. All right, so we've made a new Lambert. So is everybody able to make a new Lambert right here? I click, I make a new Lambert. So then next, what would I do? So once we've got this new Lambert, we need to have the Lambert selected, which means I want to see this little yellow kind of box around this Lambert number 2. What we can do is we can right-click on the Lambert. There's a number of different ways to do this, but I can come down to the bottom. We can go to Rename. So we're going to give this a new name. All right, I go into here, and we're going to call this Wheel Front. Wheel underscore front. Use underscores, please. Wheel underscore front. I go OK. All right, so let's see if we can hook this thing up. So again, there's other ways of doing this. Let's do it the simple way this time. I've got it selected. We can see that it says wheel front right here in the tab. And I see wheel front here. It's worked. I come across this color tab to a little checkered box at the end. I click on the checkered box. It brings up the creation tab, this create node tab, create render node. And what we want to do is we want the file node right here. It looks like a little mountain with the sun coming out behind it and a blue sky. So I'm not going to actually take it down. I'll leave it up here for a sec. So you need to, again, first click on this little checkered box next to the color tab, and this create render node window will appear. From here, is everybody okay? Now what I'm going to, were you able to solve the problem in the back? Okay, thank you. Okay, so from here, I click on the file node. Okay, by clicking on the file node, what we start to see, this is what's known as the workspace. So just a little, I kind of go on a general overview. This is known as the library, where we see all of our shaders, where we're starting to collect all of our shaders. This would be known as the library. And then this would be the workspace. This is where we do our work, where we start to create shader networks. You can create very, very elaborate shader networks. Some of these can be thousands of nodes long. They do this for the movies, like when they're doing skin colors and stuff. One person's job is just to create the skin color. And he spends lots and lots of time doing that. Okay, so at the same time, when I've clicked on this, we also see over here in this little attribute editor, we see this little, the ability to access the file. So we just, if you guys have emailed something, you've created an attachment, it's pretty much the same thing right here. It says image name. And right now what we're going to do is we're going to look for the front view of our rim. So I click on this little folder to browse. I go to my desktop and I choose the one called front view. For those of you, might be confused, you might say this is the side of the rim. The way that we would actually build the car should be facing us. The headlights should be going down the z-axis, and the rims being part of the car make it so that this would actually be the front. So this is the front view. I click on it. I go open. So I'll do it one more time. So I go like this. I can click on this here. So I just select the actual Lambert 2. I come down to this, mine's different now because we have an incoming file, but I click on the checker box that would be next to the color, and that's going to bring up the create render node, which doesn't come up for me, but now I have the ability to get this little, this folder. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. So now let's make the next one. So let's do the second one. Create a new Lambert. And we repeat the process. So I'm going to go, this one's going to be side view. So I just rename it. It's called wheel underscore side. and go OK, like that. And we do repeat the process. I click on the little checkered box. I go to the File node, and I find the folder. And let's take the side view. There it is. It should look like this. And I go Open. All right. One of the reasons we did this is because this is sort of ambiguous. I can't really, it looks noisy. There's just visual noise in these, and I can't tell what the front and the side is. So we need to start naming stuff.
Another Lambert for the
yes. So I just went down into this create node, and I click on this Lambert here. We get another one. And we're looking good. All right, so I'm going to clean out the workspace. So let's clear out the workspace. I press delete, and what I've done is I've done you a favor. So one of the big things when we start texture mapping, which we haven't covered, texture mapping would be basically applying the process of applying this shader to a surface. And what we can do is we can apply it in lots of different ways. Most of the ways will not produce the result that we want, unfortunately. It'll give you some sort of distorted version of the actual image on the surface. So what I want you guys to all do is watch me. Don't try to duplicate yet. So I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to go down to Polygon Primitives, and I'm going to go to Plane. It's already automatic. You don't have to watch, I guess. Normally what you would have to do is if I hold Shift, and you can drag objects out. Mine's generating it by default. I actually prefer to generate it myself. But if I hold Shift and I click, I can drag out a perfect square. You can also, if I just click without shifting, I can drag out rectangles. So what we want to do is we want to end up with a perfect square. Why do we want to end up with a perfect square? The reason we want to end up with a perfect square is because these reference images that I've given you are square. So this is a square image. The dimensions on one side equal the dimensions on the other side. Why do we do this? Is because when I map this to the square plane, there's no distortion. If this was a rectangle, problems start to set in, and we have to use special mapping techniques to make it so that we're not having any pixel stretching. Because this is a square, if we map it to a rectangle and it fills the space, it's going to get pulled apart. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, so that's really important if we're trying to model fairly accurately. All right, so these are both squares right now. So what we want to do is we want to make two squares. So I'm going to go like this. We got one square here, and what I can do is this is going to be this could be our front view. So this will be front view. So in the hypershade, I'll show you multiple ways to do this. One way of doing it is I select the object. Object is green. I mouse over the shader I want to apply to it, and I right-click, and I go Assign to Material Selection. Watch what happens. You got to watch carefully. You see that it changes. The color pops a little bit, but I don't see a shader on there. So what we can do is, if I press 4 on the keyboard, we see wireframe. If I press 5 on the keyboard, I see shaded. If I press 6 on the keyboard, I see textures. So if your model's getting really big and heavy, if you're using huge texture maps, this is one thing to keep in mind. If you're using an image which is bigger than 2048 on this thing, there's going to be chances it's not going to work. So the bigger the texture map gets, and also if it's a found texture from the internet, it can create problems to render it. If I see a little mountain appear in here, in like a blank screen behind it, it means it can't render. There's not enough memory on your computer to actually render out the texture. So you want to keep these things within reason. And another thing you could do is people would oftentimes, if you keep the dimensions the same, I could have a massive texture, which is the same image of this with the same dimensions, and then I just scale it down for working purposes, and then at render time I swap the textures out and apply the larger texture, so I get the high res. All right, so here's the first one. A really nice graphics card, and it's probably a tower computer. You know, it's like, you'll know, it'll sort of stop. You'll hit your sort of threshold.
Or is there any way to you know how Substance Painter you can dynamically switch from a super high-end texture
yes.
to a low texture? Is that possible?
Yes, That's absolutely possible. So you can go back and forth. That's an advanced level lesson. I think that would be good. Was there another question? What? 5, 1, 4, 3, 5, 6. All right, so let's look at a different technique. So maybe that didn't work. Here's another way. So I could go like this. Let's change the color. I'll go to the regular Lambert. I'm lazy. I like the physical act of doing something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to middle mouse click on the shader I want, and I drag and drop it onto the object I want it to be on. I release the middle mouse. Dunk. I like this because it feels like I'm actually, doing it. Like I'm not pushing a button. I'm sort of doing it by hand, kind of. So you can middle mouse click and drag and drop. There's a number of different ways we can change the texture out. These are 2 of the more common ways. All right, so let's keep going because we got a lot to cover. So I'm going to go Control D. I'm going to duplicate this plane that I've just made, like that. And because it's on the same surface, I'm going to go like this. E on the keyboard, and let's rotate this one like this. Let's get it a solid 90 degrees. So I open up the channel's layers. I go into the rotation value, this Z value, and it needs to be 90. This basically, it actually needs to be negative 90. So I see the back face right now. So I'm going to make it negative 90, enter, and now it's facing us. Okay? This needs a little bit of love. It's not quite there. So then the next issue is this. We're going to do this like we're actually doing a car. So what we want to do is let's get Z facing forwards. I would take, in my class, you'd lose points if this wasn't done correctly. I would go after you too on the board. I'd bring up your project and we'd look at it. What I would do is we want Z facing forwards. If you're wondering which direction it is, look at the little the cube down here in the bottom left corner, and just make sure the blue arrow is facing towards us. The arrow wants to be into positive space, so I can mouse over. But this is how we would actually construct the car. So from here, I'm going to take the front view of the rim like this, and I'm going to rotate this up, and let's make this 90 degrees like that. There's 90 here. Okay, is everybody with me? Is anybody not with me? Raise your hand, please. Be proud. All right, what do you got? All right, so the general idea, why don't we watch me set it up real quick, and we can get everybody going. The end result is going to be like this. I've got this view here. I have to actually change this to a second view, so I middle mouse click and drag this onto there. There's the rim. Control Z, this is the profile, like that. The problem is the profile starts in the middle of the rim. It doesn't start at the bottom of the rim, like this. So I'm going to take the rim like this, W on the keyboard, drag it up like this. And this is the origin. What we're looking at right now is a snapshot of a grid. This line right here is the origin in our reference. This is the other origin. So this should probably be the x-axis. This is the x-axis. This would be the axle on a car. So the axle would be going across and the wheels would be connected to it. That's what we're looking at right here. What I want to do is I want to take the center of pivot and I want to move it down to this axle, or to this to the origin. So I press D on the keyboard to release the pivot. We're not going to snap. This is an eyeball project. This is risky business. I move it down to about here, like this, and I'm eyeballing it. And this isn't good enough. In a perspective view, like still too risky. Pop the space bar, mouse in the workspace, like that. Let's go into a front view. And where's my texture? 6 on the keyboard to bring the texture back. Zoom in a little bit like this, and I'm actually pretty good. I could do a minor tweak on it. I want the center pivot to be, basically dead center on this line. That's about like pixel as close as I'm gonna get. All right, so I've got that done. Now I'm gonna go spacebar back, into a perspective, and now I use the grid snap. I hold X, and I'm gonna snap this. Yeah, all right. So it does work. Control Z does undo the pivot. I press D again. Normally in the old ones, you just press D, and when you release, it would automatically undo. Now you have to. It's like I'm manually turning it on and off, which is sort of annoying. I press X like this, and I snap down to the grid. This is now at the origin. This is at the origin. Where it is at the origin on X doesn't really matter. It can kind of be back and forth a little bit. If you want to be like, dead with the reference image, I can move this this line over, but that doesn't really matter too much. What matters the most is that this line, the axle from the reference is dead on the origin on X. So that's where we would want it. So it has to be pretty much here. From here, what we're going to do is here's our reference image here. And if I look at my reference and it's centered right now, the reference is not exactly right. So I'm going to also modify the pivot on this. I'm going to go spacebar, side view. I'm going to press 6. Let's get in here. And I got to get in close. Like, look at this. It's not on the center. Like, this is definitely way off. So I'm going to go D on the keyboard to release the pivot. I'm going to slide it over. Again, this is an eyeball type thing. I can make the move handles bigger, so I can go plus, and I can see if they're actually really resting on the origin, because I can see a line here. It's super low res. It's pretty hard to tell. I'm going to go grab this one, and I'm going to bring it up like this. So I've got it basically, now it's centered. This is where the axle would be kind of meeting the center of the wheel. Like that. So I want to just get that center pivot. By default, it's not going to land in the middle. Pop the space bar. Pop into a perspective view like this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap the center pivot where I moved it to the center back to the origin. I hold X and I'm almost there. Bonus points for people who stop me when I'm messing up. I have to press D again, which is so annoying. And I hold X. Now we get it back to the origin. So that should be, let's look at it in a side view. That's like pretty good. That's pretty good. Like, it's basically spot on. So I'm looking at the grid units, and this is the center of the axle is on the center of the origin. Like, this would be.
How do you get the object to snap to the other origin?
X. So X and hold should be. Yep. Yeah, and you guys, please, thank you, Alfredo. You guys got to speak up. Like, what I always say is, when I first learned I was so lost in my first class. I was just, like, completely lost. All right, so let's just finish this real quick, and then we'll go over questions. I know some people might be having issues. So from here, now what I'm going to do is, this is the coup de grace. Let's finish this thing off. I'm going to select this image here. This is the front view of the rim. I've selected. I press R on the keyboard for scale, and I'm going to scale down like this until I see the lip meet the top of the reference. So what I have to do is I have to actually slide it across. I'm going to hit minus W, and I slide across like this until it intersects the rim, like that. And I want to see that they exactly touch. They should be basically touching. Like this. So they should just about here. So that's pretty close right now. That's pretty darn close. I could bring it down just a little bit. So now what I could do is, again, when I'm scaling from the central handle. If I'm doing anything else, I'm distorting the image. So I'm grabbing this central handle and just the tiniest tug down. And that looks pretty good. What you guys will have to have done is bring the whole thing down like this. Scale down, 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 until that top section, this part right here, not this part up here, meets the top of the rim. I'm going to go bar down. That looks good. So that this is actually at the top of the rim. Then I go W, and we can move this out. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to take questions for people who are having difficulty. All right, who's got a problem? Yes. Say again.
It's more of like I don't really know how to. Can you like a little bit serious? It's sort of like a specific.
You want me to come over?
Oh yeah, I guess I could ask.
Or wait, what do you want me? It's better if we do it on the board so everybody can see it.
I'm having trouble like sort of snapping it, I guess. I'm not really sure about
You want me to start over from scratch? I can go back from 0. Let's start over again. So here we go. I'm going to put this on a layer. I'm just going to turn it off. Let's start over. So let's one more time. So the principle, we're going to create 2 planes, get the images on them, orient them correctly to the grid, to the Cartesian grid, and then scale them so that they're in alignment, essentially. That would be the general workflow. So let's do it. create polygon primitives plane. I'll make one. Maybe what we could do is we could just sort of set the planes up to start with. Now what I want you guys to do, like good modeling practice would be, it needs to be facing Z is the front of the car. If there are headlights on the car, they're going down Z. So I can take this here, and I'm going to go E on the keyboard, and let's rotate this up. This is going to be the front view. I'm just going to give this a solid value of 90, like this. Boom, enter. Is everybody able to do that? Is anybody not? Good. So now what we do is press Control D, duplicate it. Now what we're going to do is let's grab it. I'm going to grab this handle right here, the rotation in Z, and I'm going to twist like this. I can actually give it a value of 90 as well. But I want to see, is this the back face? It looks like this is the back face. I don't know. It is not the back face. The back face is over here. This is what we want. So again, like when I look at this stuff, what I want to see is W, that the this is the positive space. The arrows are pointing into positive space, and our view of the normal should be in the positive space. This is the negative space. As I move into the negative space, I start seeing the back face. I start seeing the back face. These are the negatives. So in the positive space, we want it basically facing into positive. So I come over here, and let's give this just a solid 90. Work with these solid values. It's really important. All right. So is everybody able to do this? It basically looks like we've created a plus. Is anybody not able to do this? Raise your hand. Good. Then let's go forwards. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply the shaders to the object. Does everybody have the shaders set up in the Hypershade? Does anybody not have the shaders set up in the Hypershade? Okay, so I'm going to assume that you do have them set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the side view of the reel. So just keep in mind that this is facing forward. This is the Z-axis. This is the side view, and this is the front view. I middle mouse click on the front view. I drag and drop it onto the one that's facing us right there. And then I'm going to spin around just a little bit like this, and I'm going to grab the side view, and I drag and drop it like this. Is everybody able to do this? Is anybody not able to do this? What's wrong? So then, you guys, again, it's really important to speak up if you have a little problem like that, because I wasn't saying middle mouse or left mouse click. So thank you for bringing it up. I'll try to be more specific about my clicking. All right. So you're okay? Okay. All right. So from here, now what we need to do is this profile that we're looking at on the rim, there's a little bit of a distortion. So what we're seeing here is really only from here up. This image here is starting from the center of the rim, which is there, which means this needs to get smaller. Because these images were mapped to squares and that the original reference was mapped to squares, I want to do any scaling on this universally. So the only button I'm grabbing to scale is the center one. I do not grab the x-axis. I do not grab the z-axis. I do not grab the y-axis. I grab all of them together. So I can just manually sort of eyeball it and go W up like this. And sometimes this is the way some people will try to do it. They'd go like this, it's like this, R, and I'm scaling. And this is a waste of time because you're fighting against two things at once when I'm doing this. What we really want to do is isolate the pivot, so I'm only worried about one side. So I can go like this, W, let's move it over here. People were having issues with the pivot, watch carefully. I select this image. We want to go into a front view. You can't do this kind of work from an perspective view. It's too exact. So I'm going to go, I just hit the space bar once. The only button I'm going to click is the space bar. I push it quickly. It changes to the 4 heads up display. We want to shift into the front view over here. It's a little small, so I can hit F on the keyboard to zoom. And I'm just going to pop the space bar again. No buttons are being clicked. I just have the mouse in here. I tap it, and it opens it up. Now what I want to do is I'll move this center pivot to the origin in the reference image, which would be right about there. So I press the D key. What's up?
Why is my front view like this?
Press 6 on the keyboard.
Got it.
Yeah, it's okay. No, you got to ask the questions. Ask the questions. It's really important. We want the questions. So what I do is just eyeball it. I get down here. This is pretty good. Sort of like that right there. That's pretty good. And then right over here, get it centered on the two of them. Then what I would do is if you're being really good, you get in here close. And we find out that, no, it wasn't quite as good a job as I thought it was. And let's move it over there like that. That looks pretty good. That's pretty good. I guess that's like okay. No! Okay. Yeah, that thing just freaks me out. Like normally you should just press D and then it goes away. But I press D and it goes back. Is everybody able to move the center of pivot to the origin? Again, we are recording this, so we'll give this to the group. Is anybody not able to do this? Raise your hand because we are going forwards, and it's really important that you have this part working. So I'm going to assume that everybody's okay. I'm going to hit the space bar again. Let's zoom back just a little bit over here, and now I can snap this into place. So from this position, the origin is right here. This is going to be 0, 0, 0, and I want to move that point and snap it to here. So I hold X, I grab it, and I drag it to there. Done. Is everybody able to do that? Anybody not? Yes. Sure. So I go Control Z. Cancel. Control cancel. Yeah. All right. So from here, were we able to get to this part? Were we able to get this? So just hold X. I hold X, and you see that this changes from a square to a circle, and I just drag like that, and it pops. And I want it to be at 0, 0, 0, which would be right here. The lines are slightly heavier on the origin. You can see that this one's a little bit darker. That one's a little bit darker.
Can you also move something to 0, 0, 0 by changing the attributes?
Absolutely. The trick would be if we're actually looking at it right now. So Alfredo brings up a great point. By moving it through the attributes, the problem is this is at 0, 0, 0 as it is. But if I put 0, 0, 0 in here, it's not going to be at the origin. We would have to freeze the transformations. We would move the object to the origin, freeze the transformations so that it would know that 0, 0, 0 is its like default position, and then I could move it off the origin, then give it value of 0, and that would work. So it would probably not be the best way to do it. All right. So from here, you guys okay? Spacebar. We hit the spacebar. We go over here into the perspective view. So this is like a modeling workflow sort of foundational sort of thing. It's lining up two images. We want to take two reference images and line them up. Once they're in alignment, it's much, much, much faster to build the thing. So I can grab this, this here, and what I want to do is I basically want to slide this across until I hit the extreme on the reference. The extreme is right here. This is my high point right there. And what I want to do is I'm going to slide it across until this point intersects the front view of the wheel, or the side view of the wheel. So here we go. I'm going to slide, 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 and now we're intersecting. Okay? So now we have the intersection. And the idea would be then I don't do anything else. I hit R on the keyboard. I grab the central scale, and I drag down like that. It's right here. So now the center is basically overlapping the other one. Is everybody able to do that? Is anybody not able to do that? Awesome. So this is not what you should be doing. This would be pixel stretching. This is disaster. Don't do this. Control Z. You make cartoon cars. W. All right, so we're about to go forwards to the next major step of the process. It's really important that this is sort of set up or you're going to be in trouble. So now that everybody's here, we're going to hit the spacebar again. Just get comfortable moving in and out of these views. I'm going to mouse into the front view, spacebar. I hit F to frame it. Let's get in there. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to do CV curve tool. So this NURBS time. This is when we start working with the NURBS. So I go to create, and we're going to go down to curve tools, which is different than it used to be. And I'm going to create a CV curve tool. So I'm going to leave it up on the board for a second so people can see the file path. Once you click it, the tool is armed. It's like you've armed a gun or something. We haven't used it yet, but it's ready to use. So once you start clicking in the workspace, you're going to start creating the tool. Is everybody okay with this? Anybody not? What's up?
When we're creating it, do you want the access to the line again?
Mine is perfect right now to work, pretty much. So as long as this right here is on the origin, it doesn't even have to be exactly here. It could be off. It's just the axle needs to be on the origin. It needs to be on the origin in X and in Z. So the two of those. In Z and Y. In Z and Y, it can slide across the X. This is the X axis right here. So as I go off, we can see. Okay, so from here, let's arm the tool. Ready? Here we go. So I'm going to go create curve tool, CV curve. All right, so we see I get this little plus sign basically appear here. I have the plus, which means the tool is ready to use. And what we're going to do is this is like tracing. We're going to like sort of trace by number. I'm going to click once and then stop. So I click once to draw the initial point. Again, you could get in here close. We could get in kind of close and make sure it's fairly exact. So I'm going to go like this. It doesn't matter that much, but I'm going to click once. I release. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the shift key. And the trick is when you hold the shift, if I click and go up, it will constrain the line I'm drawing in the y-axis. If I click and go to the side, it will constrain it in the x-axis. So vertical and horizontal. So let's do horizontal. I'm just going to mouse a little to the right of the initial click, and I hold shift, I left click, and we can see I can drag back and forth, and it will only make a horizontal line like this. So I drag it into this corner right here where I see the line coming to an end. I release. Then what we have to do, this is sort of the dodgy part, we have to click exactly on top of the original, the one that we just drew, 2 more times. So 1, 2. You see the line turns white, and we go up here like this. And now I'm able to get a hard line. If I don't click 3 times, I'm going to get a soft curve. Like the curve will be soft, like a spline curve. Right now we're getting something much more like a linear curve. So I click 3 times. That's the one little kind of tricky thing. I do the same thing at the top. 1, 2, 3. And then I hold shift again and drag it across. I get another hard line. I want to hold this hard edge at the top, so I'm going to get in here a little bit closer. And I'm going to go give it 2 more clicks. 1, 2. I missed, so I wasn't exactly on top of it. I was a little bit off. Good enough. And now what I can do is I'm going to start to basically trace the image that the original creator made. So I can click like this, I can click here, and I'm just following the dots as I go along. And we can sort of, they're using EP curves, they're not using CP curves in this drawing, although it said something else that I was reading. Like this. I'm going to have to come back and manually tweak this, so it's actually good to see. Like that. And then from here I can hold shift. No, I'm gonna leave it here. Control Z. I'm going to click here like this. I'm gonna have to really come back and rework this a little bit. So I click here at the base, and again this is gonna be 1, 2, and we can come out here like this. I'm gonna delete this one. Hold shift, click out to the edge like that. 1, 2, shift click down. 1, 2, 3, shift click. See, look at what's happening. I'm trying to drag it in the side, and I moved it in the vertical axis before. So I go delete. I move it off the side a little bit, and then I move it over here like that. Again, 3 clicks. It should actually be 2 if I can get it just on. 1, 2. Shift click down, and now I'm at the origin, and we're done. Easy. Does yours look like mine? I hope not, because mine needs a bit of cleanup. So from here, I move back a little bit. I look at my work, and I'm not impressed. I see that the line I was drawing is not staying true to the reference. So I mouse over the edge, I right click, and let's go to edit point. I can go, I'm going to grab the move tool, W on the keyboard, and we just manually tweak this thing in. So there, look, now it's overlaying. I come here, we go back a little bit like this, and that's getting close. That's pretty darn close. I think my work looks a little bit better than it used to. How are we doing? It doesn't matter if it's perfect. It matters if it's pretty close. Can we get it pretty close? Yes, no, maybe? Yes?
Still kind of confused, like, what different number of clicks do?
So, good question. Let's take a look. I go create curve tool. I was using a CV curve. So watch. I'm going to try to draw a right angle. Let's try to draw a box. Okay, so if I click once, I hold shift, I drag out here, I release. This point is here in space, and now I come down here and I click and LOL, delete. What's happening is I have to click 3 times for the curve we have to actually generate a curve. This is not the curve right now. This is actually kind of the hull for the curve. Watch what happens on the 3rd click. It draws the line. And on the 3rd click, we get basically an approximation between these values. By clicking 3 times, it's holding this line down at this point in space and basically allowing me to create a right angle. If I don't do that, it's going to give me a soft curve. We can control the curve through the attributes, but this is for another lesson. Cool, so then I can delete this. Yes?
How do you select the point on the curve to edit it?
So I select the curve, good question. So this is my reference material. This is something that you guys might think about doing. I have my reference material up. I'm trying to select the curve. I selected the curve, but I'm also selecting the reference. That's a pain. Like, this is just kind of hindering my workflow. So what I do is I select this reference material, I put it on a layer, and then I lock it up. I can just go from T, which would be transparent, to R, so this is locked. Now when I select all I can select is the curve. Cool. And then your question. Now to the point. I right click on the curve, which brings up its component mode. This is the same as polygons, but NURBS have different components. And I can go with a few things here. I can go with curve point, control vert, or an edit point. Normally I would work with control verts or edit points, one of these. So I could go to a control vert. We can see right here, yes, these are the points in space. I go W, and I can now manipulate the curve. Control V. All right. You guys good? Awesome. Cool. What? Oh.
Like select the point of the whole curve gets selected.
So watch me do it. Ready? I'm gonna go like this. Right click object. So we're going off. So I select it like this. Boom. The curve is selected. It's green right now, so I'm only able to edit this as an object. I right click on the curve. I have to be directly above it. I'm going to work with control vertex. So I move over control vert. I should see all of these sort of magenta colored dots appear. You see those? I select one of the dots.
Are they exactly the same thing?
And it turns green.
The whole curve turns yellow.
Turns yellow. It depends how many points there are between.
I only selected 1 point, but the whole thing actually.
Did you select the first one or the last one?
No, just the first one. But no, just like the middle one. Yeah, I'm like dragging and selecting it.
Press W. Try to this. I honestly, off the top of my head, don't realize the option would be based on tools position. So orientation would have to do something with the selection. Yours is pretty good right now. Don't worry about it for now. Just go with it. Your edges are good enough to revolve. Okay, so just go ahead and I'll figure it out. Send me, put it on the Slack and I'll check it out. I haven't even got it. I have to think about it. Yes?
For the curve on the bottom, what happens if when you were doing it, like, it wasn't straight?
You have to insert knots into the curve and you try stabbing down. Don't worry, I just did. You can go to like curves, you can insert knots, and it's a little trickier. The trick would be, honestly, probably faster to redo it and just really quick 3 times. You have to be meticulous about landing on top of the other components. So.
All right.
I figured out.
What's that?
Your email?
My first name period last name @gmail.com. You figured it out?
I know.
What was it?
Because the soft select was on.
B key. Yeah, so it should be the B key. You're right. I know it is. I know it is on a polygon. I've never seen the problem on a curve. So here, let's just actually. It should be. Okay, look at what's happening. This is the soft selection tool. I've never seen this problem before on an actual NURBS curve. I see this problem on geometry. When I'm selecting something, there's an area of influence with a drop off on it. Think of a ramp shader. As I get closer to the edge, it sort of tapers off. The idea is basically as I select something, if I'm doing soft sculpting and I'm pulling on the surface, it isn't making a hard pull. It's making a soft pull around it. So it's as though I'm sort of, it would be like pulling on your skin. You could sort of see that it doesn't pull straight up. It's kind of, it has a tapered edge area of influence. That's what the soft select tool, and it's the B key. So I press B on the keyboard. We can see it turns on and off. That was just a pain. What could have been happening here is the area of influence on the soft select tool is greater than the entire model that we've made. So it's just saying that the number of units, basically, we've got about 2 units, 2.5 units. It's probably soft select is maybe 5 units. So we're just right in the middle of it is what's basically happening. So I press B. Thank you. That was actually a great solution. I've never seen that in NURBS before. All right, so we got to keep going. Space bar. Back to the, we can do this in a perspective view. So from here, what I'm going to do is we finished with this image here. So we're actually sort of done with the front view. If we've done it correctly, we're done with the front. If you've done a good job and you think it looks okay, I would probably save it at this point. I would save my work. So you could just file save, give it a name, just in case it goes completely wrong. You can go back. So from here, I select the curve. I have the curve selected, and we're going to do some real NURBS stuff now. So what we're going to do is we're going to revolve this. I'm going to basically revolve this curve to create a surface. And what we're going to do is I'm not going to do a full sweep. A full sweep would be 360 degrees, so we just see the full thing. Let's take a look. So I go into here. If memory serves me correctly, I think it should be surfaces, revolve. So surfaces, revolve, and I want to go into the revolve options. It's critical that your center of pivot is in the right place, because if it's not, that's not what it's going to look like when you revolve it. I'm going to revolve it around the x-axis. So I think, where is the axle of the car? I look at it, and I can see that this is x. This is x. Right here, we look over in the little our units cube, and it's telling us that's also x. So I want to revolve it around x, and it's by default it's set to 360. Let's just look at it. So I go apply, and I get something that looks like this. This is the beginning of our rim. Okay, but this isn't what we were hoping for. So let's go Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z it back. And what I want to do is let's actually make this a 30-degree wedge. So we're only going to make 30 degrees of the 360. So put in 30, and I hit Enter. And I apply. Success. We've done it. We're almost there. So we've made a little kind of the pie wedge, essentially. Was everybody able to revolve the 30-degree wedge? Raise your hand if you were not. Great. Okay, we're going to make it through. We're going to do this. How much time do we have left? How much time do we have left?
We have about 35 minutes.
Maybe. Maybe we can do it. Okay, so here we go. What we're going to do is, what I need to do is I need to make this object semi-transparent so I can actually look through it to see the background image. Because right now, what we need to do is I need to go, boom, into a front view like this. We got to get in a little bit closer. And I need to look through this image and see the reference material behind it. The problem that we're facing is that this has no transparency on it right now. So to solve that problem, what are we going to do? There's a number of different ways we could do this. I can go to shading and I can go down to X-ray. I'm going to click on X-ray. And then it turns everything transparent. That's one way of doing it. If you're working with fairly exact lines and your reference material is a little shaky to begin with, I mean, I can see the pixels in this image. You could get more out of this. This isn't, you know, a perfect reference material. So what I want to do is I'm going to, does this work for everybody? Can you see your reference pretty clearly behind it? So by clicking, let's just keep going with it. Let's go X-ray here. Let's go down to shading and I can go to X-ray. The other approach that I could do is go like this. I can, I select the rim, I right click on the rim, and I go down to material attributes, like that. And then I could go to transparency and we could go like this. And this is actually, this won't soften the background image. And now the only image that's actually being affected is the one in the foreground. And that's actually quite a bit better. So from here, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to him later.
How do you flip the normals again? Really fast?
Flipping the normals, I would be under mesh display and reverse right here. Yep. All right, so I've got this. Now what we're going to do, you guys have to focus with me for a second. This is going to be a little tricky. We have not talked about this. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate isopalms on the surface. So I go, these are known as isopalms. This is a NURB surface. These are not edges. These would be the construction sort of geometry. So what I want to do is I'm going to right click above the actual pie wedge like this. I right click. I go to isopalm like this. If it's transparent, it's better probably not to click into the middle, but if I click directly onto an edge is much safer selection. So right click on the isopalm, I click on it like that, and now what I can do is you can see I can click and drag on any of these little lines and I can drag them out like this. I want to drag this line and I want to get it as close as I possibly can to match the reference underneath it. It's not going to be perfect. So just assume that you're not going to be able to do a perfect job. So I release like this. I'm going to do it again because I see people looking. So one more time, everybody watching. So I'm going to click off. Once I click off, the isopalm disappears. So I go right click above one of these edges on the pie wedge. I right click. I go to isopalm at the top. Nothing's going to happen. Now, when I left click on any of the edges in here, I can click and drag them around the surface. I'm going to click and grab one that's closest. What I want to do is we want to create the profile of this opening in the rim. I click on this one and I can drag it out here like this, and I want it just to match that edge as closely as it possibly can. We can see if you look towards the bottom, if we start to go towards the axle, that it's really falling off and it's not lying exactly on the surface, so it's kind of failing. But that's okay. We're going to have to clean it up. I release the button. What I'm left with is we can see very carefully if we look a little dotted yellow line going across here. Is everybody able to get the dotted yellow line? A lot of hands are going up. Yes?
Yeah, I just didn't get the red line from the beginning. I don't know why it didn't show up.
So if you go right click isopalm, did you do that? I let go and I can grab any of these.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So just make sure you're kind of clicking on all the right stuff. Anybody else? I saw other hands. Yes? So I could right click on the object. I go down to material attributes at the bottom here. I release and I see that the color comes up here in the attribute editor. The second one down is transparency, and I can Okay? You guys okay? All right, so let's.
Just quickly, if you can't see the image on both sides, is there a way to do that? Because sometimes...
Flip the face, like you were sort of saying, probably.
Okay.
So I would do the mesh display reverse.
Or you can literally just reverse it 180.
You could literally reverse it 180. Yep, that would also work. Some things would be, if the grid is too dense, like if the grid is ultra dense, all you're just going to see is gray. You won't see an image. But you wouldn't be working right now if we just had you're seeing gray. So I'm going to do this. So here we go. Follow me. Right click, isoparm. I'm clicking directly on top of the lines. I click, I drag. I like it right here. This is pretty darn close. I release. You get this dotted yellow line coming across. I go to surfaces. I go to curves. All right, so I'm going to go to curves, and then I'm going to go down to duplicate surface curves, like this. I'm going to leave it up on the board for a second. So after I have that yellow line up on the screen, I go down to curves, duplicate surface curves. Is everybody able to do that? I click on it. Watch what's going to happen. Boom. A new curve appears. So that little isoparm, which was just floating around, and if I clicked off, which would disappear, is now a real curve. We repeat the process. I click on the surface again. I choose the one for the top. So we're going to get one for the top, and we're going to get one for the bottom. So I'll do this one. Right click, isoparm. I'm going to click here and drag it down. And we can see definitely not a solid match, but pretty close. And then I repeat the process. I go to curves, duplicate surface curve. Let's do it again. Right click isoparm, click on this curve and drag up like that. So now it's matching the top one. Same process, duplicate surface curves. Now we should have 3 curves on the screen, like this. 1, 2, 3. Oh, not that one. And from here, what I can do is, at this point, we could almost turn off this geometry, so I could just open up the channel's layers and throw it on a layer, turn it off. So I'm left with this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here. I'm going to shift click here like this. I've got the 2 of them selected. You guys with me? Who is not with me? I see people smiling. Okay. You with me?
I'm like many steps.
Okay. All right, so I've got the 2 of them selected. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut them. I'm going to basically make a cut at this intersection so that we can get rid of the excess. So I'm going to go over to curves, and I'm going to go down to cut. I cut it, and we see, if you were watching carefully, that now the only green section which is selected is no longer a continuous edge. So I select the excess. I select that one, shift click, select this one, shift click, I select that one, and delete the excess. Just hit delete. I come down here and we have to do the same process. Select 1, shift click 2, and then mesh, curves, cut, and then 1, 2, delete this stuff. All right, so then we're left with this. Here's our background image. Let's just turn this off for a second. So we should be left with something that looks like this, basically, right here. I've got this, if you've done it correctly. What we want to look at here is the actual attribute editor. So I'm going into the attribute editor, and we want to look at the attributes of these lines. What's happening here? See these crazy values? You got 2.373. We want like solid numbers. This should be like 4. It should not have any decimal points. So we've got to clean this up. The problem is we're going to take these 2 curves and weld them back together. We're going to combine them into one curve. And this is asking for trouble right now, having these crazy values here. So what we need to do is we need to do what's known as rebuilding the curve. Okay? So once I do it, I reparameterize it, essentially, is what's going to happen. I'm going to give it a new set of parameters so that we can have a solid number here. So I select the curve with this, and then I go across to curves, and I go down to the bottom, rebuild. We could go into the options if you want to get nuts, and you can choose the number of spans that you want to have in here. So the number that's going to come out here is the number that I'm telling. 4 should be fine. I go apply like this, and Oh, it's actually, we have 4 spans, and then you've got 0 and 1. So this is clean now. You want to have clean values coming into everything. Same process, 9.313, 12 point something, something, something. Apply, good. Same one here, apply, and we're just cleaning it up. So now you've got zeros and clean numbers. Sweeping selection across the 2 of them, like this. Now that it's clean, and we want to attach them. We're going to weld them together. So I go to curves again, and I'm going to go down to attach, like this. This one you really do need to go into the options. There the attach options are, and you can connect it, which will give us a hard angle here. So this will preserve this hard angle, which is at this corner. We can also blend it, which is what we want to do. We want to do the blend effect. So I go apply. This is going to be how soft that angle is. So I go apply, and we can see that this, I get a nice little curve here. And then what we want to do is, just check over here. Just make sure that when I select it, these values are just the solid numbers again. I do the same process here. Shift click. You get the leftover curves there. Those are the 2 construction curves. I would just delete them like that. We're left with this one. Select the 2 of them. Again, watch out for the central curve. Select these 2. Apply like that. Now we're getting kind of good. At this point, I would go and then control click, get rid of the excess like that, and get rid of this one here. Yeah, okay. So now we're left with this. This is getting closer. So then what do? We go back over to channels layers. I open up the reference image. It doesn't look perfect. I go right click. I'm going to go to control vert like this. And where are my control verts? Right click, control vert. There they are. So I click right click control vert. I'm going to start pushing and pulling this back into place. So I select here, and maybe go 1 by 1 might be better. I can start to, that's pretty good. I come back over here. Let's do this one. This needs a bunch of tweaking. Grab this one here, like this, and just kind of trace the line. The bottom is a little bit of a mess. This does not need 4 spans. I went a little overboard on it to the point that it's actually going to be possibly problematic. I'm going to go, I missed, right click, control vert. I'll take this one and I'll pull it up. I'm just giving myself room to breathe, sort of. Grab this one. This one goes there. This one goes here. Like that. And like this. Like this. Like this. And now you basically got the profile of the rim. So I turn off the background image. And what do I want to do? I'm going to turn on the wedge, the pi wedge. Where's the pi wedge? There's the pi wedge. So is everybody with me? Yes! Awesome! Cool. Alright, so I'm going to go spacebar, spacebar. I'm going to come around here, and we're going to project this curve onto the surface. So we're going to make this part of the surface. So what I'm going to do is, this is the important part. The curve needs to be in front of the geometry. It cannot be kind of floating behind the geometry. I can see there's a little kind of wobbly effect here. The thing is, I only need to see it in a front view, and it's just going to project the line as it sees it onto the surface. So I select the geometry, and I need to make sure that this curve is entirely in front of this geometry. Watch what's going to happen. Right now it's going to fail because it's going through the geometry here, and then it's going through the geometry in multiple places. I shift click on the surface with the curve I want to project on the surface selected, and I go to surfaces, project curve on surface right here. Boom! Look what happens. This is it. I guess it worked. Did it? Crash. So what I would want to do, generally speaking, it looks like they fixed the problem in the newer version. What would happen in the old versions, anything that would go through, it wouldn't project on the surface. It would project on the outside of the surface. The other thing that was also happening, if we look at the projection on the surface, is that I'm Control Zing. There. Okay, we're back. All right. What happened was it didn't project it exactly. I need to be in a front view. Let's just say good practice. I select this curve and I just pull it so it's in front, like that. It's not on the surface. It's just in front. Space bar. Move into a front view like this. This is the way to do it. Shift click, and then I'm going to go curves, surfaces, project curve on surface. Now you get an exact one-to-one. This is what I want. I click here. Can I do it? I'm going to take this one. I'm going to put this on a layer, turn it off. I take the curve here. I know this is a little kind of long ways to go. Turn this one off, and then turn this back on, and you see that we get this. So we can see this curve is now part of the surface, like this. So things that are going to break this, the curve has to extend at least to the edge. If it goes under the edge, if the curve is a little bit back, the next process that we're going to do won't work. It has to be a closed loop, essentially. So sometimes when you're making the curve, it'll be just a little bit back and it won't be touching the edge. It's not going to work. You got to either just grab that vert and pull it out so that it's either going past the edge or it has to be exactly at the edge. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the hole. So we're going to make a hole for this part of the rim. So I go to surfaces, and I'm going to go to the trim tool. It's still here. There it is. So I go into the trim tool. I go into the trim options, so it's under surfaces, trim tool, and I go to the options like this. I click on the options, and so what's going to happen is the part of the geometry that I click on is going to be the part which is saved. If I change it to here, the part of the geometry I click on will be discarded. So I want to click on the part which will be saved, which will be this outside section. This is the part which will be discarded. So let's do it. I'm going to click over edges is a surefire way to kind of get something. So clicking in the middle, a little bit dodgier. Clicking over here, you can't go wrong. So I'm going to go click right here. I get a little yellow dot, and I should be able to press enter. Yes. Almost done. This is from memory. I haven't done this in like a year. Okay. I don't use NURBS. Like I never use NURBS. But you guys need to do it at least once so that you can say you have a general understanding. This is the one lesson we force you to do. All right. So everybody who's with me, any success? I don't see holes going down the side. So watch this. So here's what else I could do.
Did anybody get lost in the previous step?
I think they're like, they're not doing anything. She's sort of like.
It's projected on the surface, but it's not connected to the edge.
Yeah. What I'm thinking is, I'm recording it, so it's better if I almost just keep going, just to kind of finish it. So you guys can watch the recording afterwards. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's take it home. We're almost there, you guys. So here we go. Now what I'm going to do is this duplicate isoparm is awesome. So I can go like this. Right click, isoparm. I should be able to get the trim edge. So this is another way of selecting it. I can get the trim edge. And this is a trim edge because we've just performed the trim procedure on this geometry. I've selected, I right clicked, and then I go to trim edge, which will allow me to select a trim edge. Even though it's gone right now, it preserves this geometry which is transparent. It's still sort of there. It's like it's been turned off, but it's actually there. We can still call this stuff up which is invisible if we know how to do it. One way of doing it is this. Watch. So I bring up this construction curve that we have. I can select it. Right click object. I can select it. If I do selection like this, I do control click back here, and if I move this, watch what's going to happen. See, it's like I can move this back and forth across. So it's not like it's this permanent thing. It's kind of mutable. So I go like this. We bring it back here. Let's turn it back off again. I've got this curve, space bar. I'm going to go like this. We're going to front view. I go right click, trim edge, like this, space bar. Right here, I just double click on the trim edge. I've got the trim edge. Same procedure. It's not that bad. Curves, duplicate surface curves. done. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go R on the keyboard. I would actually bring up the reference image again. I want to move the center of pivot to the bottom of this curve. So just kind of go with me for a second. I'm going to go D, and then I'm going to go V for point snap. I'm going to go C. So it's not DV, it's C for curve snap. So we watch, and we're going to see a different one depressed. So that's curve snap right there. I press C. So this is a little dodgy. What I have to do is I go D, C, C, and I actually have to sort of activate it. I have to drag it along the edge, and it will click and grab the edge. It won't do it by default. So right now I actually got lucky. It's on the edge, and you can see that once it's on there, it will slide along the edge. If I just press D, D, I move it off, and again, so let's watch for a C snap. I'm holding C. I'm trying not to grab those other handles. And look, I'm moving over it. It's not snapping. And C is definitely depressed. I have to basically, I see snap, and it goes into the corner. Let me just take this for 1 second. Hey, how you guys doing?
And by the way, guys, you can also use that C snap
Hello?
an object
Hello?
onto a curve. So if you wanted to
Hey.
animate some object like moving around through like a weird curve that you created, you can also
Yeah.
C snap any object onto a curve.
Perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. See you in a sec. Bye. Okay, so from here, I've C-snapped it into the corner. Now what I want to do is I'm going to, the purpose of this would be to basically R on the keyboard so that I can scale this thing down. And what I want to do is I want to scale it down so that it basically hits the bottom edge of the rim there. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit like this. I'm going to go W, and I would actually move it up like this to the outer edge right there. So it's right there, and then I have to R, scale it down like this so that now it's at the top and it's meeting all the way around like this. There's a more exact way to do it. What I could do is I could also go create curve tools. I could do an EP curve. I could turn this back on. There's the curve. I could C-snap with the EP curve across the original curve like this. I snap into place. I move across the top of the curve, and I snap into place there. That gives me my guide. I press Enter, and then I can grab this one. I press W, and I can, again, C-snap onto here. And now I know I'm exactly at the edge. If you want to be fairly exact about it, I can go over here and grab this, and I can C-snap to it as well. But this is pretty close. I don't need this anymore. So that one's gone. I go delete. Then what I can do is we go like this. 1, Shift, 2. Oops. Get rid of this. Let's go grab this one. I've got the 2 curves selected. I go to surfaces. I go to loft. All right, so now we're starting to get the interior of the curve. This looks pretty good. Here's the dodgy part. This is where it gets like a little bit sketchy. I have to remember if it's still here. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make this outside of the rim here a soft angle. So it's not this hard 90-degree angle. There's a soft bend to it. It has like basically a little bit of a bevel going across it. So we go to surfaces, and here it is, the round tool. So this is the round tool. I click on the round tool once. Fingers crossed it's going to work. The scale of your scene is going to have an effect on how the tool works. I click on it once, and this is where it will either work or not. I click, fail. Oh, there it is, right there. So as I said, the scale of my scene is going to have a major effect on the overall tool. Right now the tool is way too big. It's trying to make a round profile, which is that big, and my scene is tiny in comparison to what we're looking at right now. So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. I should really Control Z it out. I should get rid of the actual tool. All right, so I'm going to go back. So we just go like this. 1, Shift click 2, surfaces loft. At this point, let's try it again. Curves, round tool. Where are you? Or surfaces, round tool. options, round radius. We could bring this way down like that. Let's see if that works. There, so that's actually closer. So we can see that it's a bit closer than it used to be. If I hit enter, failure. What am I thinking? So issues would be, I have ideas of what the problems might be. We want to, I should probably delete by type history on this. We'd have to clean the model up for it to work fairly accurately. So let me see if we can do it again. The Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. I would want to kind of go back before I got the tool selected. Yeah. Mesh would be for polygons, so it's not going to work on a NURBS object. It will work if it's a polygon. The issue here, what we're having, the history has to be pretty clean. So let's see if we can do this. I selected both of them. I'm going to go edit, delete by type history to clean it. The history's gone. Then what I would want to do is let's check it in the attribute editor. Yeah, so see this? Let me just see. Yeah, this one right here. So I said we had to rebuild the curves. I'm looking at this curve right now and we have crazy values coming into it. This would stop it from working. So I come over here. I'm going to go to curves, rebuild. It looks clean, and I don't think I can rebuild this one. That's not going to be possible. So my curve actually looks a little wonky right here. We're going to just ignore that and just keep going. I select these two. I'm going to go to, let's try it one more time. Let's just go one more time. I'm going to go edit, delete by type history. This is when you're cleaning something up. If I'm taking it to a video game or something else, you always want to clean the history up. Right click. This is just bugging me out. W on the keyboard, a tiny little tug this way, something like that looks better. All right, right click object. It still looks clean. It looks clean. I'm going to go to surfaces loft. It lofts the surface. At this point, I'm going to go to the surfaces round tool. Let's try it again. And there's the tool. I'm going to bring it down even a little bit more than that. Where was it? It was like, it could be even tinier than it was. And let's go here. Fingers crossed. It's still pretty big, and I should be able, oh, here, like I can manually bring it up and down with the middle mouse click. I forgot about that. And I can, so sizing it up, sizing it down, and let's go with this. I'm gonna go spacebar. I just want to see what's going on. Let's move into a perspective view really quickly. Side view. So to get into a perspective, I can go here, perspective, and zoom in. It's not really wrapping around it the right way. We've got some form of issue. I'm gonna hit enter and let's just see what it does. It's not going. I'll figure it out. We'll give you kind of a little update or something in the blog. Oh no! Oh no! I know what's wrong. Total failure. It's good that you guys see this though. So what's happening is the curve I dragged in front of it is the one that I lofted it to. It's not lofted to the geometry. So it's let's Control Z that. I can save it. I know it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is why you want infinite undos. There. All right, so it's finally off. One more try. Let's take this one. I'm going to put it on a layer. So open up the channels layers, throw this in here, turn this off. All right, so from here, I'm going to go right click, trim edge. Select that, shift click this, and then let me just check this one more time. So you do have to be fairly meticulous about how these things are clean. It still looks good. Go here, right click, trim edge, select the trim edge, shift click the interior edge, surfaces, loft, success. So now let's try it. Let's go to surfaces round tool. Right click to image. Somewhere like there. Didn't work. It could be pretty small. It didn't work, unfortunately. What can you do? We'll figure it out. There might be. I haven't worked with this version of Maya on this. Let's see if it's gonna. Like this. Boo! It's not working. If it works, basically what would happen as soon as I click enter, we should get an entirely rounded edge going across here. So what we could do from here is, you got 18. We got a few minutes left. Select here. Let's say the round tool did work, and then we're cool. From here, let me just select this one. I just want to make sure all of my selections right now are at the origin. Shift click here. Everything's at the origin. So I go Control D, duplicate it. Channels, layers, and I'm going to scale it 1 in Z. So go into Z, -1, enter. Now you've got like 2 sides of the rim. I don't need the actual curves. I just need this stuff right here. Shift click. 1, 2. I'm holding cap locks. 1, 2, 3. So I get the 3 of them. All of their pivots are at the origin, and this is, it won't work if they're not there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edit, Duplicate Special Options. The Duplicate Special Options, and we want to offset it by 60 degrees. In X, it should be rotating in X. So rotate in X, 60. And the next is going to be, we want to make number of copies by 6. So we want actually 5. See if it works. 5. The rim is basically done. This is a simplified version. There's like, we put the bolts in it and everything else, but I think for you guys, if we could just kind of get it to this place with the round tool on it, then you guys would have. This would be considered like an intermediate NURBS assignment or something like that. So you'd have some understanding of how to work with NURBS. All right, you guys cool? I think we're at class right now. We finished the assignment in 1 class.